I want to direct my first question to Jake and Maher. Describe the challenges and benefits of that first-person immigrant and refugee narratives in the classroom. What are the challenges, but what are also the benefits of bringing that there? Maher and Jake?
So how I done that, like before I go to school, the teacher there already showed them my video. And the teacher already prepared them to each team, each student kind of do them homework to know like what's refugee, where they come from. They kind of a little bit have knowledge about it, about like refugees and immigrants. And when I show up there and I start sharing my story, it make me feel also not worry, like, okay, these kids don't understand anything and they cannot understand what I'm talking about. Most of the time when I go there, the student engaging so much and they feel so happy. And like after even me finishing talking, they just want to come to me and they just talk to me. They want to follow me on social media and they want to like, they feel, okay, I want to help. I want to make a change. They feel like leader. They feel like they want to make a change and they don't know what to do. And so that made me happy. That made me feel very happy. And teachers also, after 1 week, they keep emailing me saying, hey, the kids keep talking about you the entire week. And that made me very happy. And I would love to do that for the rest of my life. Sure.
Well, you can see the thing about Maher is you have such great positive energy that the minute you start talking to you, you feel disarmed, you feel your friendliness and your warmth. And so the challenge for me is, how would I do that in a book? Because I don't have the advantage of Maher standing there in front of all the kids and winning them over with his personal charisma. And I'll tell you one quick story, which is that when I was thinking about how to tell this whole thing, I suggested to my editor, well, why don't we start in Syria, where this all begins, where we see the city of Homs, where this family it lives, descending into civil war. And my editor said, no, you can't start it there. You've got to start the book more or less close to an American school. So when the kids have their first exposure to Naji, who's the teenager in the center of my book, they're seeing him as an American teenager in a school, someone they can relate to. And then when you get to chapter 4, towards the end of the book, there's 5 chapters, then you flash back and you show what he escaped from Syria. And by then you've bought in, you've hopefully had that personal connection. And when you see what he's been through, you really feel the drama and the horror of that because you connect to him on a human level. And so in some ways, my task as the storyteller is to replicate the experience that Maher has, win over the reader with the dynamic, charismatic teenager, just as a person, and then kind of once they've had that buy-in, slowly tell them this incredible backstory.
Yeah, I agree. Like I remember when I did something. So when I go to school, I will share with them story different than when I share at like United Nations when I spoke there in 2017 or when I go to college. So I kind of relate it to photography and art, or sharing with them a story. In Iraq, we have 4 hours of electricity. I'm coming to America and see 24 hours of electricity. That is crazy. I could charge my phone all day, all night. I could read a book. I could study. I could do more things. Also share with them stories like, oh, I remember I learned English through Google Translate. Walk into one of the park in New Haven, and I saw a girl sitting in a chair reading a book. I walked to her and I said, hi, my name is Maher Mahmood. I'm a refugee from Iraq. She looked at me and she said, sorry, I have a boyfriend. And the kids just laugh and feeling he's not a different. He's still human. He's joking. He's like related, like all these little things. They understand it. Like, and after that, I share with them the deep story. And that's when they fully engaging, because they feel in the beginning, they related to many things I said in the beginning.
And Max, as someone who has interacted directly with the family in question, with that charismatic teenager, in their process of acclimating to US life, how would you suggest teaching about the refugee experience to English learners in a way that helps them mirror their own experience without re-traumatizing them? What should teachers be mindful of?
I think starting with, as a teacher, you really have to recognize the fact that that the children and the family themselves have had a lot of trauma. You have to start there, and then try to inform yourself, learn everything that you can about their families and their experiences. And I think the next step is really start developing a safe space in your classroom where you demonstrate to each student that you value them, that you value their culture, their language. And I think more importantly is you value who they are, right? You want to make sure that you are raising them up and developing them as students and making sure that we recognize that. And I think that can be done as a teacher. You have to model it. You have to show and be willing to tell your own story. And whether you're, in my case, I was an EL, I came when I was 7, so I can share my story. You got to show some vulnerability and be a willingness to do that so that they know that they can connect with you and you can start developing a trust. And I think once you've done that, then really it's about an invitation, not a requirement, but an invitation for them to share their stories and let them know that it's okay, that if they're not ready to share, that it's okay for you not, that they don't have to do that. And I think once you have 1 or 2 students, in Najee's case, you have Najee and Amal, 2 very different, brother and sister. One who was, thrilled and just, extrovert. He just wants to share everything. And Amal was very quiet and very timid and was not willing to share and just wanted to stand back and watch. Extremely intelligent, but she wanted to, do things a little by little. So, and then once you share it, you start developing, the students within your groups, your classroom, start seeing the commonalities that they have. And then you start seeing that they're willing to start sharing their stories. And then, just like you'll notice as you're reading the book, they start developing some really close friendships with the kids in your EL classroom. And, when you're looking at teachers, particular ELs, teachers, you have to realize that you are the guardian. You are there as their parent away from home. And it's absolutely imperative that you do a couple of things, that you shield them from the outside forces and these longstanding systems that are already in place in the public school, with testing and a curriculum and these pressures. And, it's absolutely essential for you to first create that space and then think about their social and emotional health. And then you can start thinking about, what can help them get to the learning piece of the curriculum and all those different things. And I think that's absolutely, in my experience, what you would need to do.
Denzil, can I add one thing? Because I had the privilege when I was reporting this for the New York Times to see Mr. E in the classroom, and he was a phenomenal teacher. And I think that what I heard from Najee time again was that he felt that this guy cared for him and on a personal level. And he did one thing that meant so much to Najee. He said, Najee, if you and Amal want to pray, here's the key to my office. You can go there whenever you want. You can close the door and you can pray in that space. And they had thought there's no way we can do this in American public school. And it meant the world to them, and it made them feel welcome, and it made them feel that this guy cared about them. It's in the book, and anyway, it was a seemingly small gesture, but it was super powerful to these kids, and just a testimony to what a caring and really phenomenal teacher you were, Mr. E. I had to throw that in there.
Thank you, Jake. And Max, you brought up something really important, this kind of family engagement and telling your own stories. I will draw attention to our July online workshop that we host every year. Look up Emily Francis and the Immigrant Learning Center on YouTube. She's a teacher in North Carolina who really is an expert at being able to tell your story to students in a way that connects with them and draws out their own stories. Kira and Meghan, do tell us, beyond ELA classes, we have teachers who are teaching social justice, social studies, history, other subject areas. What are some techniques and strategies you have to bring welcome to the new world into those classrooms and those sorts of topics and subject areas?
Sure. So speaking about the Curriculum and Learning Guide from the ILC, it was written to be used in any context. So there's enough history that it will support reading of a novel in an ELA context, and enough ELA to get some critical thinking and reading skills in a history context. So again, we designed it with that flexibility that you can sort of pick and choose what makes the most sense for your context, and then use a final activity that really works with the goals of your class.
Kira, you want to jump in here?
Sure. Yeah, I would say I think there's a lot of really evident ways to tie this into other subject areas, civics, social studies, history, human rights. I think we often, have this preconceived notion that narratives belong in ELA classrooms, but really narratives are the way that we learn just about any subject material. So whether you're understanding the history of human migration or understanding our contemporary immigration system or asylum seeking system, applying a narrative in addition to whatever nonfiction resource, or actually, I mean, this is a nonfiction narrative, but whatever informational nonfiction resources you're also using will help create a much more well-rounded picture for students about what does this look like in the abstract, and like what does immigration look like, let's say, as I'm exploring all of the different ways that people enter the United States, and also here's a really personal example of what that looks like in practice, so it's not just an abstract concept. And then it also using it as an anchor for classroom culture. Having a story that everybody reads together is a really great way to connect students to each other around the material. And I think this definitely fits into the trend that we're seeing in social studies, education across the board, moving away from textbooks and moving to all different kinds of media to engage with social studies topics. This is such a great tool for that.
And Max and Maher, I wanted to ask you, as a refugee and as someone who has cared for refugees, can you sort of just briefly outline your experiences for attendees and talk about assumptions? What assumptions did each of you have that were sort of correct or incorrect that you discovered? Maher, you want to go first?
Could you just make the question more clear? I didn't understand that word. I didn't know what it means. The one you mentioned. Could you make the question clear more?
Sure. What did you believe about America or Americans or the schools here or teachers that turned out to be right or wrong?
Okay, so that's a big question. So it's a lot. I think my experience being here in America, I just learned so much, and I could see the big image. Most of us just see it's just the small image. It's just how to fix this problem. But none of us are zoom out and feel what caused all this. What is the big image? I keep experiencing different things. When I go to private school, only rich kids are completely different school when going to where my brother go to school. The school he go to, it's all immigrant and refugees and some American. But some schools are completely different thing, different style. And I feel this gap, and each teachers, they teach different thing. And the other thing I learned, most of the teachers, they kind of learn many things about refugee online or through videos or through other teachers. And I encourage all the teachers to go and meet refugees one-to-one in person. This is a completely different feeling. You'll be engaged more, you will understand them more. But also you have a lot of knowledge and you already read a lot online, or you could see videos, or it's completely different thing. That's one thing. Second thing is to empower people. If I was a student, I don't want teachers to feel sad for me. And if I was a student, I want to, all we have this idea is we need to do better thing. Because we struggle, we come from war, we come from a lot of crazy things. All we need to do is improve, change. And if that teacher challenge me, I will forget most of the trauma and everything. All I need to do now is to just be the best student of my school. I want to speak at the end of the graduation, and I want to be a leader and help others and give back to my community. This is the mindset we have. And I feel teachers should kind of understand that.
What do you say to that, Max?
I completely agree. There are assumptions that you make. I remember, when I knew that I was going to have Najee and Amal coming to my classroom, what you naturally would do is you want to read up on everything that you can about the situation, look at the news, and read the books, the articles. No matter what you read, it's never going to prepare you for when they come to you, because you can't intellectualize. It comes out of your mind. It has to go into your heart, really. Because once you have them, what you need to do first is think of them as people, and you really have to think about not rushing through things. As a EL teacher, I think one assumption that I thought was right is that I just needed to stop whatever I was doing because they needed need to be there 24/7, like as much time as possible, whether it meant, meeting the entire family for as long as they needed, making sure that I was with both Amal and Naji from class to class. I never left their side because I knew they needed that time. And you have to, your students that you have already gotten acclimated to everything that's going on. They are your English learners, so let them go ahead and continue. But when you have a student who's a refugee, just like Maher mentioned, you can't feel sorry for them, but you have to make sure you're there for them, because there's a lot that they have to process, the culture, the students, what they see in the hallways. You know what a middle school and a high school hallways look like. The chaos that can happen, and they're not used to that right now, right? There is very different schooling in the countries that they come. So as long as you understand that, and you have to empathize with what their needs are, that has to be your priority, and everything else has to be secondary. And you have to be okay with that. And your administrators in your school you have to try to make them understand that. Because they're very refugees. I've worked for many years as a dual language teacher. I've worked with students who are primarily Latin in the Latinx community. There's a great deal of diversity in terms of language, race, traditions. I've also worked as an ESL teacher with kids coming from Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and those that there's a huge difference between students coming, for whatever reason, versus those who are refugees. I've had students who come from Guatemala who have seen horrible things. And so you need to make sure that you give your all when they're here, and then just, take it from there. And once you see that they're comfortable, that they feel safe, then you can start letting go little by little and letting them move forward. And Naji just went steaming ahead. And so I kind of just stayed with Amal. She struggled with things like gym. She struggled with, having to wear a uniform. So these are things that you try to be there for. Let Naji, now that he's a little bit more comfortable, move along. I still checked on him, but I knew that he was able to acclimate a little bit more, and he was trying really hard. But I wanted to also make it clear to him that he shouldn't really change who he is when he comes. Just try the best that he can to kind of go through the day-to-day of schooling.
Got it, Max. And last couple of questions, Meghan and Kira, and also Jake, we have a pretty sizable number of adult educators here who want to know about adapting this book or using it somehow in adult education settings. What ideas might you have?
Well, that was the original audience that was intended for this. I mean, so where this began was I was a journalist and I was following this family around. I was literally, going to Mr. E's class. I call him Mr. E because that's what Naji called him. And I was reporting on what was happening to Naji. And then that week it would appear in the New York Times. And so the audience was intended as an adult audience. What was surprising to me actually was that as the series caught on, I started getting messages from teachers and parents saying, I'm reading this with my kids. Honestly, I didn't think that was going to be the audience. So I think hopefully it's a tale for everyone. And in fact, it's actually almost best served up as something that a parent could read with their kids, because the point of view is quite different in the book from the father, from the son. I won't go into too much detail, but when they come to America, it's Naji, the teenage son, who's telling the dad, we have to come to America. America is going to be the only place where there's opportunity. And the dad was saying, but my mom and my brothers and sisters, they haven't been given the visa. It's hard for me to leave them. And so they have this kind of ongoing discussion. And then when they come to America and they get a death threat and things doesn't play out the way they want, the father and son revisit this conversation. So in many ways, the book is this intergenerational conversation between dad and son. And for that very reason, I think that it can play out as a kind of discussion point for kids just as well as for adults.
Kira and Meghan, I know you all haven't taught adult ed, but what suggestions might you have? The Immigrant Learning Center is an adult ed center.
I was going to reiterate, I think, a little bit of what Jake said, that my first introduction to this content was through the series in the New York Times. But I also just speak from my experience going from an educator of elementary school students to an adult educator in my current role, where I primarily work with other teachers, and say that a lot of the content that we break down for young people is just as helpful to adults, right? And we don't need to necessarily think that if our content is not dumbed down for students, then it works just as well for adult learners in many ways. Of course, there are different modalities and approaches to working with adults. They bring a lot of information and assets into the classroom. So I think my biggest piece of advice would be to add to all of the amazing resources that ILC is providing around this, this material, is to have more opportunity for the adult learners to bring in their own expertise, right, from their personal experience and the knowledge that they already have about seeking asylum, about immigration, about migration, about, say, like maybe the conflict in Syria or other similar displacing events around the world. Have that be the entry point for the adult learners.
Yes, briefly, I completely agree. I think that if you're using this with adults, I mean, I love reading young adult literature, and this isn't even really young adult literature. You would have more discussion-based, more connection-based, more connecting to real life and their current assumptions and experiences, maybe less of the skill building. But I think in a lot of cases, adults can use all of the same sort of working through the reading and some discussion questions that students could, younger students could.
Final question for all of you. Teachers need resources. And the mini curriculum that we've created, the discussion guide from the ADL, what else is out there to bring immigration and refugee stories and issues into the classroom? Where can you point our attendees to?
Denzil, if I could just start, Max mentioned earlier about teachers needing to be comfortable talking, and being vulnerable about sharing their own stories. So in addition to understanding, more resources and getting more resources for teaching about immigration and the refugee experience, I would also encourage educators to look into anti-bias resources, getting to know what their own preconceived notions about immigration, about refugees. Many of our teachers are immigrants and refugees themselves, so that will be a different approach that they will take. But ADL has a number of mini lessons that teachers can engage in, like 20-minute professional developments that are asynchronous, where you can just get to know some anti-bias topics and feel more comfortable talking about these things in the classroom.
I would seek out, beyond graphic novels. I mean, the picture books are also a great resource. There are just a variety of picture books that tell stories about immigration, about refugees. I know I've used them in the classroom. Even if you're just showing a picture and just having them, speak to those pictures and having them kind of use their language, colleagues, I would say, you reach out to, the ALAS, you have different organizations that also have a lot of resources, like Connecticut Association of Latino Administrators. That's an example of a place that I've reached out, and many of them have other materials and things that we use in the classroom.
I would also say, as someone who used to work at the ILC, that the team at the ILC works really hard to collect teacher resources. So when you get the link to the recording, check out the resources at the bottom of the page. There's a lot there from all different places, and that's a great landing page if you're looking to teach something else.
I couldn't have said that better myself. Jake, what is the one thing you want to leave our attendees with today?
I think that, this is a moment that we live in, regardless of what side of the political divide you are on, of profound distrust and of distrust of the other. And it's almost overwhelming sometimes to think about how we can bridge that gap, how we can work our way back to a place where we can connect even with people that are as close by as our neighbors. But I think that the message that I would just say is, let this be like a rallying cry, that even if it's one person that you introduce a guy like Maher to, or a book, or it's any small effort you can do, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to realize that behind the story of the refugee, there is a Maher or a Naji. And it's often not as difficult as it seems. It's just, you get them engaged with a book, call the local refugee resettlement agency and get a Maher to come to your classroom. But I think that there's this sense of gloom that's hanging over so much of us, but I do think that it's within all of our powers to chisel away at that and to remind one another of our common humanity, one person, one character at a time. We have to believe that, because if we give up the faith of that, then what is the America that we live in? And so that would be my final message, I guess, or hope.
Denzil,
And Maher, I wanted to hear from you.
So I just want to share this with all the teachers. So if you are a teacher and you have a student in your classroom and they're immigrant or refugees, and this is like great, but also I'm sure teachers hang out with other teachers, and if you hang out with your friend and they're a teacher and they teach in a private school, and that private school, they never ever meet an immigrant, they don't know what refugee is, completely different life. I will encourage them to somehow go to any organization in that state and tell them to invite one of the refugees to come to that school and speak. Because I know not today we talk about so much about like how to talk to the immigrants or refugees in the classroom, but I'm like, the way I think about it, so also there are so many states in America don't accept refugees, and these schools in that state, they never ever know what refugees or immigrant is. And these teachers also they never even mention to that class, because they know these kids, probably they talk to them parents, and parents don't like the teachers teach them kids about certain things about that. If we could fix that problem, because I'm sure this problem is really big also. And so let's do both. Both is great. If you know any friends, share it, tell them, hey, this is great. Also today, webinar shared with everyone. I feel we could really make a change. And I'm so glad, I'm happy to see all of you care about that. Thank you all, and I love you all.